Hi everybody, welcome to David Christopher's YouTube channel. Today it looks like we are going to be doing something a little different. I'm going to be voiceovering this video because we lost the audio somehow. We tried new mics. I have one in my pocket, you can see, and it did not work for some reason. We're not sure. We're trying to make the audio better, and we did not do that. So we're trying to make it better yet again. So we'll keep trying different things, see what works best. But we got 3 different ideas for wedding tables today. I've got a friend that's daughter's going to be getting married in later this fall, and they wanted lots of whites and greens and touches of gold. So I brought a few ideas with those gold edges, like this cube vase with that brass edge, and it sits kind of on one of the corners so that it's got that geometric style to it. And I'm just taking a little styrofoam and shaving it down till it fits that triangular base, so that I can put a candle up and lift it a little bit more. And that way we can actually do our arrangement around it. Just gotta shave it to the right size so that it fits well. Don't want it wobbly. And then our candle fits right on top. And then, like I said, we're gonna be using lots of very classic whites, creams, and dark greens for this. So I've got quite a few different versions of hydrangeas and roses to use for this. But the first thing I need to do is I'm going to use some of my Spanish moss to go around our styrofoam, because that is a clear glass cube, and when you're sitting at the table you don't want to be able to see between some hydrangeas and see to that nice bright green styrofoam. You want to see something a little more natural than that, and I'm going to hide that with the Spanish moss and then continue on with our boxwood. As you can see, I cut some branches off of our boxwood bush, and then I'm cutting those in half or into smaller pieces because we don't need that to cover the candle. We really are just building kind of almost like a nest around the candle, so that that candle is really the centerpiece, that you see that light source in our geometric vase here. That's really going to draw your attention to that particular place. And I've got those beautiful hydrangea stems that I would really love to use, but for this particular instance, that's a little bit too large. So I'm going to opt to go with something a little bit smaller. I end up using one of our hydrangea sprays that is just a smaller version of those hydrangeas. I've got a viburnum stem right there that would also work well. I think I use it a little bit later because it looks like a small hydrangea. And that way we keep it very cohesive all the way throughout. Just variations of a hydrangea, that's perfectly okay. They don't have to be the exact same thing. Don't feel like you have to be, complete 100% all the same hydrangea. If you're using hydrangeas, that's just something that kind of comes with the territory. Especially if we're going to use different sizes of things, you're going to want to use some different sizes of hydrangeas, roses, lots of different options there. And I'm cutting my hydrangea spray up, adding some of the leaves and then the blooms individually so that they go around the candle. I'm going to cut this one a little shorter and tuck it down on one of the sides. Like I said, we really want to just build that nest around the candle so that you see the candle well. I would recommend using the slightly taller candle, which I'm going to swap out right here. That height of candle works much better so that you kind of get that drop off from the candle. You see a little bit more of it. You want to see about 2/3 of the candle and have 1/3 of the candle hidden, preferably. And then I'm going to use our garden rose spray and cut it apart, and so I get just a little bit of foliage and the blooms from it and tuck those in so that we break up some of that hydrangea. Hydrangeas get a little overwhelming because they bleed together if you put them too closely together. If you've got lots of hydrangeas in a row, it can look like one giant hydrangea or like a ring of hydrangeas. So we use some of the boxwood, some of the roses really to break that up and give you some different shape options to look at. And as you can see, it looks good from all directions, except that I need to take that David Christopher's tag off the back of the geometric vase there. I'm going to add a little bit of our clematis vine in this darker green color. We have a lighter green and this two-tone green. That's really going to help us look like it's a more realistic, like a growing vine trailing piece that just really adds to the realistic effect we're trying to achieve here. That it looks like very wispy, very wild and free. That's kind of the idea. You don't want it to look too completely structured. Adds to the realism. And then, as this would be a great piece just by itself on a table, if we have a larger table, we might want to end up adding some of the hydrangeas around the vase, around the sides, and that will really add to the width and just the visible size of what we're working with here. So if you've got a larger table that seats 8 or 10, you might want to embellish this a little bit more like I'm doing here with the hydrangeas and then a little bit of the boxwood. We're just laying the hydrangeas down, and we're using the boxwood and the clematis vine really just to hide the stems where we laid those down. But that really just increases the width and extends the size of what we've done out to more of the table than if we just did the geometric vase by itself. And again, like boxwood around the stems, because we don't want to see the stems. That's one important thing when you're doing this type of arrangement is we want to see the blooms. We do not want to see the stems. The stems are the part that does not look realistic most of the time. So if you can hide those, that is the preferable way. Most people don't typically question the blooms. It's if you can see the stems and you recognize that they're plastic instead of real. So we're going to hide those as best as possible. Then we're going to move on to our second idea, which would be 2 candles in this little dish that has a cloche that goes on top of it. It's got like a hole in the top of the cloche with a brass top and a little bit of gold embellishment there. And like I said, we're adding just a little bit of gold to the white and the green in this wedding. That was what was asked for. So you could put real candles in it because it has that hole on the top, but we're going to use battery candles, always safer and less hassle. And we're using the viburnum here instead of hydrangeas because they are a little bit smaller, a little tighter, and it's going to allow us to use those in a smaller space because we have very limited space with these 2 candles in here. We're only going to have room for the one hydrangea, one viburnum spray that has 3 blooms on it. And we're going to use a little bit of that boxwood, like I said, with the white candles and the white viburnum. We want to break that up a little bit so it's not all white. Let that separate a little bit so that we can identify visually some different things. And I do recommend this for people that rent things for weddings. If you do events, if you do rentals, it's a great technique to just use some of the pieces, use some of your foliages, use some of your blooms, and then you don't have to glue everything together. You can actually just place some things and then reuse them later. This is our Sweetheart Rose. It actually comes in a little bundle like you saw earlier. I'm going to cut those up just to keep our theme of hydrangeas and roses going in between some of the boxwood. Gives you some different shapes to look at. Also works great for a little boutonniere. I think right here I'm showing you one of our other options for a good boutonniere. That's a more hyper realistic, slightly aged, like it's almost starting to dry a little bit rose. It's got a little hint of blush and green in it, but it is very hard to tell from the real thing. But I'm using the Sweetheart roses for this particular piece. Adding a little bit of that clematis vine just helps with the realism, like it's growing up and trying to get out of that cloche itself. And as I place the cloche on the arrangement, I'm going to have to use my hands and try to tuck everything in and actually push everything up toward on the glass, because as the glass grabs it and tries to force it down, we don't want the blooms to be facing down toward the dish at the bottom. We want those to be facing up toward people that are going to be looking at them, so the focal point is more facing up, like this particular rose is not cooperating. So I'm going to use a little stem and push it more up so that when I close it, it's facing more outward and up. And you're going to be able to see that from sitting, from standing, and it's not going to look like it's been, mashed by the dome. We want that to look very, organized and like it's growing, and much less like it's something we put together haphazardly. And the candles are a good thing to remember, that we want to angle those slightly away from each other. They've got that higher back on them, so we want those to be visible from more than one side. If you angle them directly, both exactly at the same side in the front, you're only going to be able to see them from the front. But if we angle them around, you're going to be able to see them from more sides than just that front side. You want to be able to see them all the way around, because if you have like a round table, you're going to have people on all sides, all directions from this. And here I think I'm going to show you how these small roses work great for boutonnieres. I use a lot of those for weddings, for corsages, for bouquets. Just a really easy fix for a boutonniere, though, that pretty much anybody can do. We're going to take a little piece of our clematis, and I'm going to actually clip most of that tiny stem off, because we just need a little bit of the leaf and that little trailing vine coming out from it. And then I'm going to take some of our boxwood. So we're going to frame that in with the clematis, and then we're going to take a tiny piece of boxwood, pull that off of our stem, and that's really all you need. And then floral tape is your best friend for this kind of thing. If you're not familiar with floral tape, it's kind of a waxy paper tape that stretches really well. Is great because it actually adheres to itself and not much else. So when you spin it like this very tight, it will hold all those pieces together. And then we just cut the bottom off of it, add a pin, ready to go. Then we're going to work on our largest piece. So I like to mix the sizes up just so you get lots of different variations. So each table is not the same. I would personally, like if there's 24 tables, I would probably use 8 of each, just so you get to see something different as you're walking through different tables in the reception. You don't want exactly the same thing, or sometimes you do, but I prefer to mix it up a little bit. Keep it a little interesting. So you walk by one table and you go, oh, I wonder what they've got on the next table. And so we would be using this large piece to break those heights up also. And this is a nice geometric lantern. It has that silver mercury glass antiqued finish in the glass that really shows up well with light behind it. You can use candles. I use a lot of fairy lights in these particular mercury glass lanterns. They show up great in there. Kind of looks like fireflies. For this one, because it's so large, I would probably cut some sticks and put in the middle of it and wind the fairy lights above it. But as you can see, I did show you what the light looks like behind the glass. We're going to be making kind of a wreath out of our clematis vine, so I'm going to be winding this really tight. I'm just making some circles out of the stems, and then I'm going to wind them on top of each other. But I know a lot of people like to use a vase in wedding receptions, they usually use a vase with some flowers in the center of a table, a few, crystal votives with some tea lights in them, maybe a few rose petals on the table. I kind of like to do the inverse of that. Instead of the flowers in the center and the lights on the outside, I like to do the lights in the center and make those the focal point and have the florals really accenting the lanterns, the candles, the light source, so that you really get that focus on the light, especially if it's a dimly lit area. That light really pops, it really stands out, it really sets the stage for just that intimate setting, which would be great for a wedding ceremony, reception, one of those things. And I'm really just winding some of the vine from the clematis around the stem, and then actually on the third one I wind the stem around the other stems itself. It's a little difficult to do that, but it's gonna hold really strong once I get that done. But I haven't cut any of this. All of this is still together, still viable as a single stem. So I'm just gonna wind these pieces together so that I hide my stems. Like I said, that's the part that we really want to do, is make sure that the clematis stem itself is hidden. The foliage part is very realistic, very hard to tell from real foliage, which you would really just have to throw away at the end of the ceremony. This way we get, you get to use this over and over again. If you're somebody that does events, does rentals, does weddings, I highly recommend using some of the faux florals, faux foliages in your pieces, because you can reuse them many times. Sometimes we'll even add some fresh florals to these, so to trick people, because we'll use like faux foliages and maybe even faux roses, but we'll use real hydrangeas, or we'll use one or two things that are real. If we're going to use baby's breath, that's one of those things that I usually use the real thing. You can use artificial for certain things, but it's a little more hard to mimic in artificial flowers because they're so tiny. So I'll use those in fresh flowers a lot of times if I'm going to mix that in. But for this, we're just going to add our boxwood and our hydrangeas to our clematis vine, and add some of our roses when we get finished with that. And we're really just extending all the florals around the lantern itself. So the lantern's still the focal point, but the further up we go on the lantern and the further out we go from the lantern, we really just make this one large piece that's combined. Now I've got my garden roses again. We're going to cut those up and we're going to add those in. I think I've got 4 hydrangeas and I think 2 or 3 roses that I cut up and used in this. And I'll be able to use those again after this wedding. I think that's our last piece going in. And these work really great for food tables, for your tables, like guest registry tables. That lantern with the little ring of hydrangeas and roses around it works great for that as well. I think I'm going to end up with a mantle at this particular wedding. I'll probably use mixed sizes of this Paragon lantern, that geometric one that we're using right now, because we have a large, a medium, and a small. Again, you can find everything that we have used in this video at davidchristofers.com. We sell wholesale and we sell retail, so we do gear some things toward professionals, but we know a lot of you like to do it yourself, and so we're sending it your way as well. So thanks everybody for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you've been inspired by some of these things. Hope you have a great week ahead. Join us every Saturday. Click that subscribe button. Send us a like. Tell us which of these you like the most, why you liked it. We like to hear from you and we will respond to you as soon as we can. Thanks.